capital gains tax to the tune of £18,000 because of what's known as flipping between your second home in London, Salford, back again 3 times, I think, in three times in a year, I think it was. What are you proposing to do to meet the criticism of all those who say you should be paying capital gains tax?
Well, I've heard absolutely the outrage and the anger that the public feel about what's been going on. And I wouldn't ever knowingly do anything to let down the people that I represent and serve. And that is the most important thing to me. Over the weekend and today, I've been discussing this with my husband, and I've decided that it isn't enough just to comply with the rules and the law, and that's why I've decided to send to the Inland Revenue a cheque which is the equivalent of what would have been paid in capital gains tax had it been liable when I've moved flats whilst I've been an MP. What's really important to me is what people think about this issue and what they think about me. Now, I know this won't be enough and people will still be angry and it'll take time. But I think now the responsibility of all of us as members of Parliament, and me in particular, with my Salford people, is to rebuild our relationship and try and re-establish some trust between Parliament and the people, and that's what I mean to do.
You say you've decided it, but on the Conservative side, Mr Cameron has ordered his frontbenchers to do a similar thing. Have you been asked to do this by either the Prime Minister or the Chief Whip? What conversations have you had with colleagues in the Labour Party?
Well, I've decided to do this. I've talked it over with my family. My single most important thing in my life is my relationship with the constituents in Salford. It is where I live, it's where I was brought up, and it's where I represent. And I've decided that despite having complied with the rules, the revenue, everything else, right, I know people feel really, really angry about this, and therefore I've decided that I want to send this cheque. It is the equivalent of what would have been paid had it been liable for when I've moved flats in London, and I actually think that's the right thing for me to do.
But have you talked to the Prime Minister or the Chief Whip about repaying this money? You say it's your decision, but surely you must have talked to senior colleagues. The Prime Minister must have, well, did he lean on you and say, Hazel, you ought to pay this back?
Not at all. I have talked to the Prime Minister, and that's absolutely as it should be. Look, I'm a member of the Cabinet. I think it's really important that people do believe that they can trust us. And I know that they feel incredibly angry about the whole system, all the stuff that's come out. And that's why I've taken this personal decision to send this cheque, which is the amount that would have been paid had it been liable, which it wasn't. But so what? You know, you can comply with the rules and everything else, but the public are really, really angry. And I have discussed it with the Prime Minister, and quite properly so.
Do you think other Cabinet Ministers and other politicians on the Labour side who are being criticised should do the same as you?
Well, I just think that all of us have got to now try and just say to the public, we understand exactly how you feel, right? The most important thing to every single one of my colleagues is the constituents that they represent. That's what we're sent here to Parliament to do. So if there are any issues that interfere with that relationship and that trust, then we've got to do the most that we can to rebuild that relationship, and it will take time to do that. I know that. That
sounds like a yes. You think other people should do the same as you?
Well, everybody at the moment is caught up in this maelstrom of activity that's going on and this furore, and I'm sure everybody will be thinking about similar things. I don't know about colleagues' individual circumstances. What I know about is my position, and my position is that I'm the Member of Parliament for Salford, and I'm absolutely determined to make sure that my reputation and my relationship with the people who send me here to speak up for them is rebuilt, and that's the most important thing to me at the moment.
Some people might say this is a desperate measure to save your job. You're buying your place in the Cabinet.
Well, what I would say to anybody who said that is they don't know me. They don't know that for 30 years I've been representing people as a councillor, as an MP, as a minister, and now in the Cabinet, and I'm doing the best I can to make sure that people who don't normally have much of a voice, people from Salford, are at the heart of government. That's my job, and that's why I feel such a sense of personal responsibility here.
You've seen the stories. People are tipping you for the sack, saying that, first of all, there was the YouTube gag that you made, which we're told infuriated the Prime Minister. Now there's this embarrassment over your second homes. You're doing this just to save face, to keep your job, and you might turn out you get sacked in the reshuffle and you might have wasted £13,000.
I don't look at it in those terms at all. What I've got here is a situation where the public are outraged at a whole series of things that have gone on, and I want to do my bit to try and say, how do we rebuild that relationship, right? If you don't have trust between politicians and the public, you can't run your democracy. And I think that's really important. It always has been to me. And I'm doing this, really, to see what can I do to try and get those first steps to rebuilding that trust, right? This cheque is, as I say, what would have been paid had it been liable. And I know it's not enough just to say I've complied with the rules, because people don't accept that. And therefore I'm doing this myself, my own decision, because it's important to me. It's been on my mind. It's affected me personally, what people have said in Salford, where I'm from and where my family live. And that's really important to me.
You've been threatened with deselection by the local party then?
Certainly not. My party has known me for 30 years. They know who I am. They know that I'll be out on the doorstep, knocking on doors, delivering leaflets, doing what I do week in, week out, because I'm not the MP that lives in London. I'm the MP that lives in Salford. I come to London to do my job.
You say you're not the MP who lives in London, but you keep chopping and changing. Why, a lot of people think, why did you flip, to use the new word, 3 times? And why did you stay in that rather swanky boutique hotel? That's a bit odd, isn't it?
Well, let me tell you about this flipping word that's become common parlance. The only reason that my Salford home was designated as my second home was at the insistence of the Fees Office, who said that when you become a minister, the presumption is that you live in London. Now, I fought against that presumption because I wanted to stay in my constituency, and that was an old-fashioned rule that somehow, when you became a minister, you got lock, stock and barrel, upped yourself into London, and you visited your constituency once a month. That's not the way I operate. And I was forced to designate my Salford home as my second home. No question of flipping at all.
A lot of people might say, I bet she wouldn't have done this if she hadn't been exposed by the Daily Telegraph.
Well, but you could say exposed, right? There's no liability. So I could say I've acted within the rules and the law and all of that. But I know that where the public are at the moment is that they're really, really angry about the situation. And I think this is one way that I can take some steps to try and rebuild that trust between the public and Parliament, because if we don't do this, then our democracy in a really, really bad way.
But people will say she's only doing this because she's all over the front pages, she's being tipped for the sack in the next reshuffle.
Well, nothing could be further from the truth. You know, my top priority when I got involved in politics was to try and speak up for people who were powerless and didn't have a voice. It took me 12 years to get to Parliament. I wasn't, Jill come lately. It's been something that I've felt passionately about all my life. I'm here to speak up for people, and that's what I'll continue to do as long as I'm in Parliament and as long as the people of Salford vote for me to come here on their behalf.